So in this video, we're going to take a look at stabilizing footage. So if I play through this video, we have a very shaky footage through here. I'm just going to mute this because we're going to be playing it a couple different times. It's very shaky. It's very much so you can tell that the person recording is walking, that they don't have very stable footing, or that they're kind of a little wobbly on their feet, which is how most of us would probably film while walking. So in order to get rid of this, there is something that we can do. We can go over to our effects library and type in stabilize, and we'll have this warp stabilizer. Now, I want to really stress that if your footage is very shaky, the best practice is not to use this warp stabilizer, but to reshoot your footage. But sometimes that's just not possible. If it's not possible, either for continuity, actor's sake, your own personal budgeted time, whatever it may be, go ahead and use this warp stabilizer. So I'm just going to drag and drop this onto my footage, and it's going to analyze in the background. Now, it's pretty much going to figure out all of the points upon your footage that could be considered stable and parts that would make it a little bit easier to make the math stabilize. So pretty much what this is going to do is it's going to analyze in the background. It's going to figure out what parts of your footage are going to be easily stabilized and be the more stable part of your footage. So we're going to let that think. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. You can see over here on the left side here where I have that warp stabilizer added in my effects controls, you can see I've got about 17-ish seconds. I'm about 75% of the way through, and you can see the frame. Now, if you've got a really big video footage, you can just throw this warp stabilizer on it, go downstairs, make a snack, and most likely by the time you come back, it's ready to go. So now it is stabilizing. And what that's pretty much going to do is we have multiple different stabilization methods in here that we can use to try to get the best result. Now, when we watch our footage, we want to make sure that all the straight up and down points of our video are staying straight up and down. So for instance, when we're stabilizing this, keep an eye on this fountain right here, because what's going to happen is we want to make sure that this is not warping in any way. So I'm going to hit play. So far, so good. Oh, we're getting a little bit of rubber banding. Oh, even he's rubber banding quite a bit. So we know that whatever settings we have here is probably not the best. So let's take a look at a couple of different things before we start changing buttons. So first, let's look at our method. Our result is going to be smooth or no motion. So for no motion, pretty much all that says is, hey, don't move my footage. Don't shift it in any direction. Don't scale it or change anything. But we're still going to get that warping. So I'm going to take this back to smooth. And we can change how much smoothness is added or subtracted, but 9 times out of 10, your method or your framing is what's going to be changed. So I'm going to take a look at my method first. First, I'm in the subspace warp. We know currently with this subspace warp, nothing's really working. So let's take a look at just position. If we just stabilize our position, what are we going to get? We get this kind of shakier footage. It's definitely better than it was, but it's not great. So let's take a look at position, scale, rotation. So far this is much better. We're not getting any kind of rubber banding here, but we start to kind of see it a little bit into the really shaky part of our video. So now we can look at perspective. So far, so good. It's a little wobbly, still a little stretchy. So let's go back just to the subspace warp, and let's take a look at our framing. So currently we are stabilizing, cropping, and auto-scaling. We can also stabilize only. So we'll have kind of the edges of our video shown. So you can see where it's stabilizing to. So we're still getting some of that rubber banding, but it's not so bad. But we can really see these outer edges, which kind of breaks the illusion of it being stable. We can then come down here to crop or stabilize. So it just kind of crops it to that one section. So we still get some of that kind of rubber band kind of look. But overall, this one's pretty good. This stabilize, crop, and auto scale is what was our default. And then there's also the stabilize, synthesize edges. Now, I'm not going to show you in this tutorial what this one does, but pretty much it takes a look at the edges and tries to blend them out a little bit further and kind of figure out and push those a little bit and kind of, make some extra data for your footage. My personal computer that I'm using for this tutorial really doesn't do well with that synthesized edges, just because my computer is just a little bit older. So just be aware that exists. So I'm going to go back to stabilize only, and I'm going to change to position, scale, and rotation. So now we get something that looks a little bit better in our stabilize here. But we see these outside edges. So when you're filming these things and using this warp stabilizer, just be aware that using a tripod, refilming, etc., will give you a much better result than this warp stabilizer. And sometimes this can give you a very good result, but you might have to play around with the buttons a little bit more. And this is pretty much all of the buttons we'll look at. There is an advanced section down here where it does a better analysis. I currently have it as fast just because it runs a little easier on my computer. And there's also some other buttons in here that work with the synthesized edges as well as our subspace warp. So that is all we're going to talk about with stabilization. And I'll see you in my next tutorial.